It's 12:02 a.m. in Los Angeles on Tuesday, the 15th of May, 2012. I'm Mark Strassman, reporter with Utopia News. I'm about to talk to David Meyer, who is a freelance reporter based in Berlin, Germany, where it's now 9:02 a.m. Welcome, David, to Utopia News.
Hi, great to be here.
Tell us whom you write for mainly and what you write about.
Well, I'm a technology reporter, and I write for ZDNet UK and for GigaOM, but I also do freelance work for other publications as well. And I mainly cover technology, but obviously being here, it's very interesting looking at the pirates as well. So I've been writing a bit about them recently. Because it's unusual for me to write about politics as such, but they're so closely intertwined with technology.
Right.
That's a shame not to.
When did you start writing about the Piratenpartei, the Pirate Party of Germany?
I only really started writing about them this year, although at the end of last year I did a feature on the Chaos Communication Camp, which is about the Chaos Computer Club, the big hacker collective here in Germany, a sort of 30-year-old hacker collective, and they have some crossover with the pirates, quite a lot of crossover. So I certainly mentioned them there.
Okay, what makes the pirates interesting for you to write about?
Because people tend to complain about politicians not getting technology. With some cause, when you've got people talking about the internet being a series of tubes, etc. But these are people who start from a technological standpoint, and they certainly get technology. And they're a fascinating bunch politically, as well as technologically, and just definitely worth covering. Ideologically, they're sort of all over the place, or they're certainly coming out of the phase where they have been all over the place. So it's very interesting to see how tech is helping shape the party as well.
Okay, we're going to talk more about their ideology or lack thereof in a few minutes. 2 days ago on Sunday, they had a big success in North Rhine-Westphalia in the election there. Tell us what they did there and where else they've been having electoral successes in Germany.
Well, they got, I think, around 8% of the vote in North Rhine-Westphalia, which is pretty consistent. That's around the same percentage that they're getting again and again. It started late last year when they got into the Berlin State Parliament, and that was the first time that people had voted the pirates into a regional parliament. I think anywhere in the world. The previous success was in Sweden. Where voters voted 2 representatives into the European Parliament. Now, that's not the same as voting it into the Swedish Parliament. They actually rejected them for that, or for a regional parliament. So it was Berlin, and then it was Saarland earlier this year. Due to some local kind of regional governments collapsing, everything's coalitions here in Germany.
Right.
They had to basically have some pretty short order elections, and there were a series of them, unusually, within a few months. So Berlin last year, then this year Saarland, then Schleswig-Holstein about 9 days ago, and then North Rhine-Westphalia last weekend. And consistently they got about 8% of the vote, and they are getting representatives into all of these state parliaments.
And is this pretty fast development for a party?
It's incredibly fast development for a party. Some may say too fast, including some within the party themselves. They don't have parliamentary experience, and they're very aware of this. So they're certainly holding off from joining any of those coalitions I was talking about earlier just yet. They will vote in favor of what they want to vote in favor of. They may support a minority government in these state parliaments or in the federal elections next year, but they're not going to be joining any coalition because they know they've got to get experience first.
Okay. Has their early primary focus on reforming copyright been superseded by their image as an upstart party that questions the assumptions of the status quo?
I wouldn't say that it's been entirely superseded. I would say that they began with an almost exclusive focus on intellectual property issues. And, the reality of being a political party, they've had to kind of expand that remit. Quite early on, they added in transparency as one of their big things. And that's probably the biggest thing that's going for them now. People are aware of the copyright issue. Just a week ago, ahead of the North Rhine-Westphalian elections, there was a joint letter signed by, I think, 1,400 German artists and creatives and whatnot, basically arguing against the pirates' copyright stance. So it's still there and it still bites, but it's not necessarily the main draw for the average voter.
What do they mean by transparency, and why is that attracting them so many votes?
Well, they are, firstly, people are just fed up with the old parties. These are parties that have been around for ages. They have even the Greens, which were in the position where the pirates are now, the Greens were 20, 30 years ago. And, some people, particularly on the left who were voting Green, have sort of find them tainted now because the Greens voted to send troops into Afghanistan, and in Germany, obviously, sending troops anywhere is a big issue. And in fact, the Afghanistan deployment was the first for many years. So disaffection is a big thing. But transparency is definitely if you had to distill it down to one word, that is the thing. They are very much a grassroots organization, a real grassroots organization. They take participation from anybody, and I mean active participation, proposing policies and the like. And people are just attracted by this, and I think they're willing to give them a chance.
Well, based on what you mentioned about the Green Party becoming part of the system, can the pirates maintain their reputation as an anti-party as they become part of the system by being elected to office?
Well, this is the trick they have to pull now. And this is where things like their liquid feedback system, which is a piece of software, online software that basically institutes was used as a channel for a concept called liquid democracy. That's where that comes into play, where they have mechanisms that they set up to ensure that the grassroots are always able to feed up their ideas up right to the top. Yes, if they can pull off that trick, then that will be very impressive. It's by no means a sure thing.
Okay, what have the 15 pirates in the Berlin Parliament been doing?
To be honest, I have interviewed one of them. To be honest, I don't have a detailed outline of exactly what they've been doing. They've been finding their feet. They have been pushing for things that they wanted to push for, things to do with minimum wage and so on. But they're not. They are 8% of the vote. They have 15 seats out of hundreds. They can make their voice heard, but at the moment they don't have any real power as such.
Is it the same with the other elected pirates? Have they proposed any legislation or led any reform efforts in the other parliaments that they've been elected to?
Not yet. I mean, those have all happened within the last couple of months. So, I think at the moment everybody is really finding their feet. Nobody seems to have done anything wildly objectionable yet.
Okay.
So.
Right. Oh, tell us more about the liquid feedback platform. How does it work, and what role does it play in the Piraten's deliberations?
Well, it's something that they're experimenting with, particularly the Berlin chapter. So I would be wary of overstating it. They also have other mechanisms, such as online wikis and, discussion boards, collaborative text editing tools and that sort of thing. So, something called the Piratenpartei, the text editor. So I wouldn't want to overstate, the importance of liquid feedback right now, but it does have, hundreds and hundreds of users who, any member of the Pirate Party can basically be a user. They have to register for it. And then they can propose, proposals. They can propose positions and things that the pirates should be doing. Others can then vote those up and down. They can make amendments. They can propose alternatives. And then, all of this kind of gets voted up or down. It sort of becomes a competition between the proposals. It's a slightly gamified system, but the idea is that what comes out at the end reflects as closely as possible what the people want.
And the delegation of votes from one person to another, does that work in practice very well?
Well, it's a very interesting system, because each user gets one vote, which they can then exercise themselves all the time. If they really want to sit there and mark up every piece of party policy, or they can delegate that vote to somebody else on a particular topic, on a particular proposal, or completely. They can just delegate that vote to them. But they can also withdraw the vote at any time. So the idea is that, in a slightly different way from how it works in a normal representative democracy, the same effect happens, that people are chosen as representatives, and some people become kind of, I suppose you could say, super delegates. They get lots of votes that have been passed up the chain. In terms of how it works, it seems to be working so far. But it's interesting because it's got that fail-safe built in. Although the votes can all go up the chain and really settle on a small clique in theory, as I say, they can be withdrawn at any time. So the voter retains control on a rolling basis rather than every 5 years, as it would be in a representative democracy.
Okay.
5 years.
Are limitations of the system being revealed by its use?
Yes, it's not a particularly attractive system, so it's not necessarily picking up, the basic, the sort of the normal people who won't want to sort of ordinarily be involved in this kind of thing all the time. It's not something that people kind of go to casually, I don't think. So I think that's a limitation, but that's just a matter of making it prettier and more accessible, I suppose. The limitations would be particularly apparent if I think too much responsibility was put onto the system, as it were. As it happens now, what comes out of the liquid feedback system then goes to a normal vote at the party conference, and people, can address it that way. I think if the system, if they were sure of the system, if everybody was sure of it, then you would see it actually finalising public policy, as in literally what comes out of the vote on that system is party policy without a vote at conference. That's not happening yet, so it is a work in progress.
Is the spirit of collaborative online discussion and decision-making that liquid feedback and liquid democracy show spreading to other parties as well?
It is, because other parties, I think, can plainly see that people do like the idea of it, this kind of thing. Their liquid feedback is a fork of a particular early kind of model of the same system, and another fork of it is called adhocracy. And both liquid feedback and adhocracy are open source and can be downloaded and implemented by anybody. Adhocracy is being used, a version of it is being used by the SPD, which is the center-left party, the large center-left party in Germany. They're experimenting with it in their party think tank. And even the federal government is doing a consultation on digital issues, and they're using adhocracy as their consultation mechanism. So it is definitely something that other people are playing with. They don't want to see the pirates being the only ones offering this kind of system, and they're trying to see what it can offer them.
Now, how realistic is it to assume that at some point, if the interface is made more user-friendly and more people start adopting it, that parliaments themselves would adopt that as a method for their decision-making and involve the population on the grassroots basis? Is that what the pirates want eventually?
Yes. That is what they want eventually. Now they know that others, are not playing by the same rules as they are at the moment. So there's this horrible phrase that came out of Google years ago. This whole idea of eating your own dog food, right. Trying out. You're creating something and you try it out on yourself first. and that's what the pirates are doing. They are aware that it's, other people aren't ready to use a system like that, and the system isn't necessarily ready to be used at that level either. But that is the end goal, in theory.
Okay. Now, here's maybe a difficult question. I wanted to know how transferable the pirate model is to the U.S., given that in Germany you have proportional parliamentary representation that lets a party with 5% or more of the vote get seats in the legislature. And in the U.S., there are single-member districts where you have to get plurality of the votes to get elected.
Yep. It's not only that, it's an issue of party funding as well. Once the pirates cleared that 5% mark, they were able to claim state funding, because in Germany, elections and all that sort of thing, campaigns are state funded. So that also, gave them a boost that helped them grow. To be honest, a system such as that in the United States, or for that matter in the United Kingdom, it's difficult to see a small party such as this growing under that system. I'm not really sure what the way around that is.
Okay. Do the pirates need to develop their positions on other issues besides the ones they're now associated with, or can they keep growing without doing that?
I don't think they can keep growing much longer without doing that. It's one of the interesting things about the pirates is that, when they were just focusing on copyright and intellectual property issues, they drew in a lot of people from the left, from the far left, from the sort of near socialist centrist left, and also from the right, the libertarian right, and because all these people could agree on internet freedoms, etc. Now, this party is now trying to work out things like economic policy, with a bunch of people in there who are on the left and on the right, and that's pretty hard, which is, I think, one reason why a system such as liquid feedback is extremely useful. It helps gauge the temperature within the party. The party is kind of heading towards the left, I think. There were some people who sort of came from the right who were in the party. A couple of them in Germany certainly had potentially extremist pasts, and the party is now trying to kind of distance themselves from those people. So, as I say, it's a party that's sorting itself out ideologically. And, as that happens, I think they will be able to agree more and more on various policy standpoints. One thing that's worth noting, though, is while we're on the issue of copyright, is that the pirates have had their digital policies adopted wholesale by a large grouping in the European Parliament, which includes the Greens as well. It's a left grouping, because that's what happens there. You have a few delegates from a party, but then they all sort of coalesce into blocks, as it were. And that left bloc has picked up the pirates' digital policies wholesale. So, while the pirates are kind of developing the rest of their standpoint, that original bit, although it's not necessarily the main electoral attraction for the average voter, has actually had quite an impact already.
So, really, the work in progress is a good way to describe the party right now.
Completely.
And,
yeah.
and there's going to be a test for them to see whether they can use their principles of decision-making to make decisions about these issues that they haven't really addressed yet.
That's absolutely correct. It's at the moment they are almost using their complete adherence to transparency as a deliberate obstacle to working with others, because they know that they have to get parliamentary experience. They don't want to enter into a coalition. So, at the moment, they have rather amusingly said that if anyone who wants to go into a coalition with them would have to agree to all the coalition negotiations, which are normally closed-door things, as we can see in the UK recently with the Conservatives and the Liberals kind of, thrashing things out behind closed doors and then surprising the nation with their new policies. They are saying, no, it has to be live-streamed. All the negotiations have to be live-streamed on the internet. And at the moment, that's almost, they are deliberately stymieing the process. They know that is not going to happen. Nobody's going to play ball. But the interesting thing is, in the future, do they stick to those principles and maintain that? And do others play along? Do others agree to it? If they do, if you've got things like coalition negotiations going on in the open, that in itself is a radical change.
Okay, let me ask you a hypothetical question. Could the Pirates get enough votes in the German federal elections next year to prevent the Social Democrats and the Greens from winning a majority of the seats, and thereby position themselves as an essential coalition partner for these two parties to create a government?
Well, as I say, they're not going to. Well, as they've said repeatedly, they're not going to enter into a coalition in the next year's federal elections. It's too soon for them.
Okay.
What they would do, what they have said that they are willing to do, is help support, prop up, if you will, a minority government or minority coalition, which, depending how the numbers work out, could happen. So they're not going to go into coalition, but they may agree to play ball and make the government functional. So that would make them essential, yeah.
And if they did that, what would they ask for in return? And what would they have a chance to get?
To be honest, I have absolutely no idea. The only thing one can say for sure at the moment, because of the fact that their policies are a work in progress, is that they would want some kind of push to do with intellectual property, to do with transparency, perhaps something to do with lobbyist registers. That's something that they're quite keen on. So maybe something in that field.
Okay, so we've really pushed this discussion about as far as it can go, because even the Pirates themselves don't know where they're going to end up.
Absolutely. No, this is why it's so interesting covering them and, watching them, because they are completely a work in progress, and they are experimenting with politics, they're experimenting with technology, and it's fascinating to watch.
What impact have they had on the general political climate so far, and how far do you think they could change it?
In Germany, there's a chance they could change it quite drastically. One of the interesting things that I've heard is that they actually picked up in the Schleswig-Holstein elections, so not the ones this last weekend, but the weekend before. Apparently, they picked up an equal number of voters, roughly, from each of the other major parties who defected to the Pirates. So they've got a very broad spectrum appeal. It's although they're kind of leftish, Germany is kind of leftish, and frankly, even some of the conservatives are, for what you would consider as conservative, they're kind of leftish. So they have a very broad appeal, and they are capitalizing on the fact that people are fed up with the old parties. And just for that, if they don't screw up massively, they have every chance of continuing on their trajectory.
Okay, good. Well, I want to thank you very much for monitoring them and for talking about it, for talking about it with us today on Utopia News. Thanks very much.
A pleasure.
Bye.
Bye.